The backfire effect, one of the most fascinating cognitive biases, discussed by the well-known psychology writer David McCraney in his book You Are Now Less Dumb, is the backfire effect. This phenomenon is a powerful, psychological force that quietly narrows our thinking in everyday life. Political debates, religious beliefs, and social relationships, often without our awareness. People are commonly assumed to be rational and logical beings. We tend to believe that when someone is presented with clear and undeniable evidence contradicting their beliefs, they will recognize their mistake, correct it, and accept the new truth. However, reality is often the exact opposite. The truth is that when we are confronted with strong evidence that challenges a deeply held belief, we frequently do not change our minds. Instead, our original belief becomes even stronger and more deeply rooted. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as the backfire effect. When evidence threatens to dismantle one of our existing beliefs, the brain interprets that information as a serious threat or attack. As a result, it constructs psychological defenses that encourage us to cling even more tightly to our original viewpoint. As David McCraney explains, the human mind naturally prefers to organize the world into simple, coherent stories or narratives. This tendency, known as narrative bias, helps us shape our identity and creates a sense of stability and certainty about the world. When information arrives that contradicts the personal story or deeply held belief we have built about ourselves and the world, several psychological processes occur. 1. Cognitive dissonance. When two conflicting ideas collide within our minds, they create significant psychological discomfort and tension. To relieve this discomfort, the brain often rejects the new information instead of revising its existing beliefs. 2. Confirmation bias. The backfire effect is closely connected to confirmation bias. We naturally seek out information that supports our existing beliefs while ignoring, dismissing, or avoiding evidence that challenges them. 3. Biological response. MRI-based studies suggest that when people encounter information that contradicts their deeply held beliefs, blood flow to the brain regions associated with rational reasoning can decrease. Instead of treating the information as something to evaluate objectively, the brain perceives it as an attack and shifts into defense mode. This phenomenon becomes especially visible during arguments between people. For example, when debating religion, politics, or science on social media, even if we present clear statistical data or solid historical evidence, the other person rarely responds by saying, "You're right, I was mistaken." Instead, they often become even more determined to prove that the evidence itself is flawed or unreliable. By the end of the discussion, they usually leave holding their original belief more firmly than before. As McCraney points out in his book, we are usually very good at noticing irrational thinking and mistakes in other people, yet we are remarkably poor at recognizing the same hidden psychological mechanisms operating within our own minds. This internal conspiracy that protects our identity and beliefs works so subtly that we often fail to notice it ourselves. Possible ways to reduce these cognitive biases. First, pledge your loyalty to evidence, not dogma. Rather than becoming emotionally attached to ideas, beliefs, or traditions, cultivate the habit of forming judgments based primarily on reliable evidence. Second, be as detached as possible from all kinds of ideologies and entities. The less attached you are, the less biased you become. The more strongly we identify with an ideology, group, institution, or belief system, the more difficult it becomes to evaluate opposing evidence objectively. Maintaining a healthy psychological distance allows us to think more critically, remain intellectually humble, and become less vulnerable to cognitive biases. The greatest obstacle to discovering the truth is not ignorance. It is the illusion that we are already right. The backfire effect reminds us that intelligence alone does not protect us from bias. True wisdom begins when we are willing to question our own beliefs with the same honesty that we question others. If our loyalty is to truth rather than to our ego or ideology, we become more open-minded, more rational, and ultimately closer to reality.